opportunities, but also reducing the cost of doing business in India. And we see various projects like the Sagarmala project, and I'm sure our Honorable Minister will touch upon areas like Gati Shakti, which has been just a phenomenal project which has so much of global attention. The second is ensuring inclusivity. That's a very, very important point, and what the Honorable Minister has done and the Ministry has done, the Government of India has done, is to really look at how we include the small enterprises, who's a big part of trade, into the trade networks. His consultations with the industry, as he has ventured into a large number of new FTAs, have been just phenomenal, and the use of technology, the use of marketing tools, and so on. The third, of course, a very shining feature has been FDI, and India has recorded really a star performance on that. And I must talk about the way we have taken advantage, the China Plus One strategy, and standing on our own on new areas like renewable energy or green products or electric vehicles or drones or even defense equipment. That's just been a phenomenal story. The fourth, of course, is cost competitiveness. I touched upon it, the competitive advantage. That will be a key for our Trade 4.0. And we have seen, in fact, the government deploying digital architecture so fantastically to deliver single window systems, fast track. And the biggest point that we are seeing is that while the central government has worked on all of these points, it's been percolating down in the state levels. And today we are seeing states competing with each other. States competing. Today we have so many states present in Davos, and the states competing with each other to see as an export and trade and investments to be a very big agenda. At this point in time, I'd also like to welcome the Secretary of the DPIIT, Mr. Anurag Jain. Warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for being here. And the last point, ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, I wanted to mention about Trade 4.0 is just really not digital trade. And it has to be sustainable. So green products, green supply chain, green companies, mobility transformation, all of this will be central. And again, India's leadership has been just phenomenal in all of this area. So these are just some few points setter for this discussion that follows. And I just wanted to also once again welcome all of you. We'll hear much more from the Honorable Minister, and we'll, I'm sure, get a chance to have a good, strong session moderated also by Shireen. With that, to take the session forward, I'd like to really request Punit Renjen to share his global perspectives on Trade 4.0.
Good morning, Chandrajit. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be brief so that Shireen can really do the moderation. I'd like to add my welcome to the Honorable Minister. It's wonderful to be with you. I've been in a couple of sessions with him. Yesterday at the First Movers Coalition, the Minister represented India extremely well. It's also wonderful to see at Davos, Indians dominating. Hindustan cha gaya. You go down Promenade and you can smell samosas. On Sunday I was walking down and I smelled samosas, and of course there's the India House. It's really wonderful to see. I want to, and also to Mr. Bajaj here, and I was mentioning this to him, this is my 8th Davos, and one of the fixtures that I always look forward to meeting was his father. And of course it's sad to see that he passed in February. Listen, I want to start and just say a few words on how the world is fundamentally changing. 2 years of the pandemic were horrible. It fundamentally changed the way we work, the way we live. It changed business. And nobody, though, anticipated Ukraine, Russia. There have been 3 or 4 inflection points in the last 60, 70 years. The Second World War was one such inflection point. It led to the Cold War. It led to the development of Europe, Germany, Japan. And then, of course, the fall of the Berlin Wall was the second inflection point, and then it followed the internet. I believe this is the 3rd inflection point of real consequence. And Davos, rightly so, has been labeled this time around as a pivot in history. Every time there's an inflection point, there are certain risks, but there are tremendous opportunities. And the opportunities, one of which that we'll talk about today, is Trade 4.0. I think it's a unique opportunity for India. I've always been very bullish on India. You've heard me say this is India's century. I believe this is truly India's century, and I think India can really dominate not only in the traditional ways, in the way that we make, deliver, reconfigure supply chains, but I think we can dominate on topics like climate, on health equity, on the ability to get development in an equitable way for all of humanity. And I think India can lead on that. So I really believe this is India's century. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
May I now request Sanjiv Bajaj, the President of CII, to give the industry perspective of
Morning, friends, and warm welcome to our Minister. We are talking of digital trade, but we must compliment the Minister for a record exports last year from India, 420 billion on trade exports and another 250 billion on services. I think the highest ever. I remember him last year pushing for 100 billion at a time where early last year things were, well, okay, things are gloomy even today, but things were far more uncertain last year. And his commitment, his push, and of course Indian industry stood up to that. So that's where we are starting from. When we come to digital trade, why is India uniquely positioned to leverage of this? A few key points that I wanted to start off with. One, over the last 10 years, as many of us know, the entire digital infrastructure built in India, led by the digital open market protocols, the India digital stack developed by the Indian government. Adding to that, our mobile telephony, the lowest cost digital data network in the world, and a combination of digital accounts has created a whole large domestic consumption and production base, over 800 million Indians using the internet for various purposes. This, over the last few years, as so many of you all who are in India know, has helped the creation of multiple platforms, business platforms, not just the big platforms like an Amazon or a Jio where we buy from, but platforms for almost every different businesses. Financial services platforms, the fintech revolution that we are seeing is creating again new opportunities which will help us leverage digital trade. Second important driver, and again something that we are all aware of, is our large, trained, experienced manpower. It's both an opportunity, but it's also a need and a responsibility. We have a few 100 million people in the coming decade that need jobs. They are trained well. That's another initiative that we as industry, working with the government, has to ensure that we train them right so that they fit into jobs from day one as well. But they are the hands available to drive digital trade going into the future. Third, services. And I talked about our record services, but within services, computer services is already almost 50%. So we have this huge tailwind that we can further build on and deliver to the world. And as we are doing this, we are not sitting still where it comes to continuing to build on our infrastructure for the future. The government, both, and I should not be talking about the government, but from what we see, the government, both digital infrastructure and physical infrastructure, keeps pumping in money. Instead, the economy in the last 2 years has stayed afloat because of money coming in from the public sector, as the private sector has had to pause within these uncertainties. In addition, focus of the government on Startup India. In the last 5 years, from less than 500 startups to over 60,000 startups, 100 unicorns. And I was talking to somebody yesterday and they said, yeah, but those are the days of high valuation. Valuation, okay, so they're not unicorn. Let's say they're 0.6 times unicorn. That is still tremendous platform for an average Indian who has the brains, who has the dum to get capital and create new businesses. When in India's history have you seen a young entrepreneur being able to challenge incumbents in various fields. So I believe that is the spirit of New India, and through Startup India, Digital India, we are seeing these initiatives driven by the government, leveraged by the private sector, which we must harvest going forward. Now, none of this comes without challenges as well. So we can't rest on our laurels of the past. We have to keep building on it. We have to look at data protection and data access. I believe that while data privacy is foremost, smart data access to especially the less literate is important. Because if they don't provide that access, they will not get the services. And we have to keep that in mind. And finally, we have to ensure that on the digital financial services side, we are able to leverage some of the very smart low-cost platforms we've developed in India as we look at setting some of the ground realities of trade with other countries. If that is something that as a government we are able to do, it will open up a set of protocols on which digital trade, financial services trade can happen across like-minded countries. So with that, let me come to a pause and hand it over to CB.
Thanks very much, Sanjiv, for those perspectives. Thank you for those perspectives. It's early morning indeed. And so, we want to take advantage of our Honorable Minister's presence, and we have various verticals in CII, and one of the verticals are MNCs in India, and with whom we work very closely. And of course, we come to the ministry very often with these prominent MNCs. 20 MNCs we had interviewed along with Deloitte, and we have published a report of the experience of these MNCs, especially in contributing to the subject that we are discussing today. And I'd request the Honorable Minister to kindly release this report on our behalf, please. Thank you, Honorable Minister. It's now a privilege and an honor to invite our Minister, Shri Piyush Goyal, to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you very much, Sanjiv ji, for your very insightful remarks. Thank you, Punit, for giving us a little bit of a feedback of what's happening around the world, what you see at Davos, what's happening amongst the minds of world companies. Thank you, Mr. Venkatram, for all your leadership of taking the India story across the world. Thank you, CB, for being the anchor which brings everybody on the same page whenever there are issues confronting government, confronting businesses, and highlighting concerns of businesses, yet being very, very sensitive to the demands of politics and government. Thank you, Shireen, for agreeing to moderate this panel discussion. And all the distinguished ladies and gentlemen, both from the government, we have Mr. Anurag Jain, Secretary of the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. We have former presidents of CII here. We have some who have come in from FICCI also to join us today. We have bankers, business persons, media. I always thought it was, the old adage was there's no free lunch. But at Davos over the last few years, we are learning that CII has changed that to there's going to be no free breakfast also. The morning tea is still with my wife, so I hope CII doesn't have a 6 o'clock meeting the next time we are here. But wonderful to see the enthusiasm that the India story is witnessing at Davos, even more than what we have seen ever in the past. This is the first time I think the presence of India has been very, very noticeable. It's not just the numbers, the large delegations that have come in from across the country, and in many cases from across the world. I think it's the sheer power that we are seeing of India reflected on the promenade, reflected in the various panel discussions, reflected in the problem we are all facing to manage our calendars, given the number of requests for meetings. And in every engagement where there's more than one person in the room, you have so many more requests coming in, and each one sounds so important that you don't know how you're going to say no. So if I have a minister from the US of A and asking me for time, there's no way I'm going to be able to say no. I have to fit it into the calendar. And I think each one of our business leaders is finding the same spirit. So thank you, Team India. Thank you, Team Business. I remember when we used to talk about the whole of the government approach and getting all of the government to work together. The next obvious step was the whole of the business world coming together, reflecting the India story. Certainly today we are seeing the whole of the society in India working together for the collective interests of a better India. And that's what brings the whole of the nation together, working for collective good, for the prosperity of millions of people left behind over the years, not privileged enough to enjoy the fruits of development. And that's where I think the duty is cast upon all of us. And the responsibility becomes even bigger when we look at it from that perspective. The positivity that all of you have shown, the collective vision for India, irrespective of likes or dislikes, individual preferences, competition amongst businesses, that's been another very, very defining factor that we have seen at Davos today. And therefore, I think when we talk of Trade 4.0, this template that we have in some sense created at Davos becomes even more important. When we talk of our international engagement, when we talk of our own internal business processes, I think this spirit of understanding and oneness can truly make a difference. And why do I say that? When we talk to other business leaders or even political leaders from around the world, they have huge expectations and hope from India. They are talking about the ABC of the future, the anywhere but China. They are talking about the huge potential they see in Indian talent. They are looking at investing in India in a big way, with every sector seeing significant traction, whether it's manufacturing, services, whether it's research and development. In almost every sector, I get a sense that people are very keen to come and work with India. And they have a vested interest. There's no charity out there. The vested interest is the large Indian marketplace, the fact that economies of scale of production or provision of services in India, from India, can help you become more competitive at the world stage. The fact that India has not only a demographic dividend, a young population, but a very, very highly talented population. All of this put together have shown that we have the ability, we have the opportunity. It's for all of us to grab that opportunity. As Sanjiv ji rightly said, the last 2 years were full of challenges. I think the 5 Cs in a way, COVID-19. We've had commodity prices hitting the roof, particularly in the last few months, post the third challenge of conflict in the northern part of India. The fact that we've seen chip shortages affecting many industries, particularly automobile sector, the electronic and white goods sector. All of those who are engaged in international trade facing container shortages and significant shipping and logistics constraints. And I think put together, supply chains have been stressed, have been challenged. Despite that, we have done quite well. It's redeeming to see that India has not only met the target but exceeded the target both in goods and services. As Sanjiv ji just mentioned, $675 billion is no mean achievement for a country in the midst of all these challenges. And I'd like to compliment each one of you for your contribution, for your role in making this happen. In fact, in a way, what you rightly pointed out, Punit, this does show that the global financial crisis, in some sense, was far more manageable, far more within certain boundaries than the current situation where you literally don't know what's going to happen next. To the extent that world is regrouping itself, democracies are realizing the power of democracy as well as the importance of democracy. And if I may borrow a phrase from what the Prime Minister said yesterday, India, amongst all these problems, offers a oasis which reflects transparency, which offers trust, the trusted partner that we can be for businesses around the world, and timeliness, that we have responded to every situation very proactively. We've been on the job in every crisis and managed to show the resilience that Indian industry, that Indian business has to offer, the resilience of political leadership, the confidence that every Indian today reflects both in his work, in his engagement with the world. And I think all of this put together is the India story that is being recognized, that's being appreciated at Davos. Things have changed. We'll have to recognize that the change is inevitable. We'll have to respond to the changing situation proactively. Any change is going to hurt, and the important thing is how do we get balance when we are looking at addressing the challenges and moving forward to truly take the Indian economy global. And as I've shared with all of you earlier, I think it's important that we all work towards a shared mission. And that shared mission, when it comes to trade, particularly international trade, if we all agree, could be a target, a mission to take India's goods export, merchandise export to $1 trillion, and our services export also to $1 trillion by about 2030. We have 8 years to do this. We have to take the $420 billion to $1 trillion in 8 years, which is truly not difficult. It's barely a CAGR of about 9 or 10%, which will get us there. We have to look at a little more aggressive push on our services side. Mind you, the $250 billion came without hospitality, without any significant tourism or travel. And we lost out on these three areas where India has a lot to offer. And therefore, I believe a 16-17% CAGR on services export is not difficult to target. We'll have to first believe in ourselves, believe in our ability to deliver. And once we have made up our mind that we are going to shoot for that, we are going to achieve it, I have no doubt in my mind that the Trade 4.0, both in goods and services, our international engagement, reflecting both strength, our abilities, and our confidence can take us there. Of course, the last 8 years have been years in which we focused very significantly on structural changes, structural reform. And today, if you look back, each one of those movements, if I may call them, started many years ago, is holding India in good stead. Can you imagine if we had not launched Digital India in 2014-15, how we would have passed through the whole COVID period? Can you imagine if Swachh Bharat, the Clean India mission, often misunderstood when it was announced from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th of August 2014, if that hadn't taken off, and we still had the kind of situation that over the years India had suffered, our people had suffered, how difficult it would have been to implement a lockdown in the country and contain COVID in the early period when it was a completely unknown bug. Can you imagine if we had not looked at JAM and the contribution of financial inclusion, the banking sector, taking banking systems to every household in the country, now probably every adult in the country having his own bank account. If we had not taken mobile penetration to the nook and corner of the country, now broadband going into every village through wire. If we had not been able to give an identity to every Indian through Aadhaar, can you imagine what would have happened through the COVID period when we had to deliver the goods and services across India and keep the wheels of the economy moving? To my mind, each one of these missions, whether it's Ayushman Bharat, whether it's the vaccine implementation, all of these have helped prepare India for the next level of growth, for the engagement with the world, for representing the India story in a positive light, in a way that the world can actually look at India when they're looking at anywhere but China. And therefore, I would invite all our businesses to go forward, have very ambitious plans, invite investment, invite engagement, technology into India. And there is no way any power on earth can stop us from achieving our mission once each one of you makes up your mind. I've seen all of you when you're planning your businesses, when you're planning your own future, how focused we are, how focused we can be. I think if we can all collectively plan for the country's future with that same spirit, and that's going to take some serious introspection on how we are going to support each other. We've had to take a series of measures in the recent past to tame inflation. I do hope each one of us recognizes that inflation is something that has serious impact on the whole wheels of the economy. High inflation leading to interest rates going up, collectively both of them leading to the rupee depreciating or our currency becoming weaker. All of these slowing down the economy, affecting growth, and ultimately leading to its impact on prosperity for the wider set of people in the country. New jobs, new welfare schemes, new ways to lift people out of poverty, a better future for our children, all of that gets affected. And therefore, there would be times when serious and impactful measures would be required to be taken. Overall, it will always be good for the economy. Today, India has to look at value-added exports. India has to look at jobs coming into the country rather than raw materials going out of the country. And a serious effort has been made to move in that direction, ensure orderly behavior of prices, particularly commodity prices in the country, and ensure that businesses can add value, can add jobs, whether it's the textile sector, which I represent in a way, Is it important to add jobs and take us all through the 5F, from farm to fabric to fashion to foreign? All of these are measures which will help India as a whole. Short run pain will ultimately lead to long-term gain. And that's the effort we have been trying to do. Logistics is one cost that the government is very seriously looking at to enable trade to prosper in the future. PM Gati Shakti, of course, has been articulated many times by me. Should there be any more concerns, I'm happy to share with you about what more can be done. But broadly, it's a tool that will help us improve on our infrastructure planning, help us take timely steps for implementation of projects within cost in the stipulated time, and work for the progress of the country in every respect. At the same time, we have a number of plans for promoting industry, manufacturing. Very often people talk about environmental problems or land problems. We have been addressing them in mission mode. Anybody, and I say this to all our friends in industry, whether multinationals coming in from abroad and our domestic industry equally at par. Anybody has any problem, whether at the center or with the states, the central government, particularly the DPIIT, Commerce Ministry, Finance Ministry, all the various sectoral ministries in the Government of India, the Environment Ministry is trying to ease the processes significantly. All of us are ready and willing. We have Invest India, which focuses on handholding investors, investments and businesses in India. We are willing to dedicate senior officials of the Government of India to large projects to ensure their orderly and timely implementation. We are very, very focused on handholding our services sector and the trade in goods and merchandise to ensure that we can capture larger markets. But in the larger scheme of things, I think we all need to also support each other to bring scale to the country. I recall, and I've shared it on a couple of occasions, look at Korea or Japan, how they have supported their steel industry through domestic utilization of steel rather than importing steel from other countries, even at times when it was available cheaper abroad than within their own country. Similarly, there are many products where a small cost, a very, very small addition to our cost structure, sometimes as low as 0.5%, 0.3%. Now I know in the short run it sounds like big money, but bear in mind, as these things come to India, as these products come into India and start getting manufactured in India, in the long run you're always going to be safer, you're always going to be better off. And no period other than the last 2 years which has reflected that over-dependence on the rest of the world in international supply chains beyond a stage. There will be products where we are not competitive at all. And obviously we are not against imports, we are not against international engagement to get the best into the country. But there are so many opportunities where a little bit more support to each other in industry can significantly impact trade going forward. And I would urge Indian industry to seriously look at supporting each other and helping Indian industry grow in scale and every dimension of the supply chain. We are looking at a number of international trade pacts. Australia and UAE were concluded in a record time, both opening markets for our businesses. UAE also is the gateway to a lot of African countries, CIS countries, and the Gulf region. At the same time, a lot of opportunities are in the works in EU, with the UK, Canada, Israel, and very soon we launch the GCC. Countries around the world want to engage with India. By the way, the Swiss and the 4-region grouping, Switzerland and the 3 other countries, not in the European Union, but Eastern EAU that we have, they are also very keen to do a trade pact. We don't have the bandwidth anymore in the Commerce Ministry to be able to handle any more negotiation. That's the spirit the world is demonstrating. That's the excitement across the world to work with India to expand trade relations. We've just launched the IPEF framework, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in Tokyo, where we are looking at like-minded countries, trusted partners, transparent economies, expanding their engagement. Opportunities galore. It's for us to grab, not lose a moment. It's the call of the hour, and I think I have the confidence that Indian industry, Indian business will come up to this challenge, will be able to grab this opportunity, and a very bright future awaits us, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's services. Tourism is one area which I personally feel holds huge potential in India, yet to be explored. We need to see some real big players coming into the tourism sector so that trade, tourism and technology, the 3 headline items given to all the missions across the world by the Prime Minister, can all take off. We engage with the best of technology, so we are recognized as a quality supplier of goods and services. We look at expanding tourism, which gives jobs and a big thrust to the economy, adds to foreign exchange earnings significantly, all of which come into the domestic economy, largely. And of course, trade, which can help us balance our payments, keep our currency strong, and work with the world from a position of strength. Every mission across the world has been tasked to work with Indian industry. Gone are the old days when ministers or our mission heads or our officials were scared to pitch for our businessmen. I remember I used to feel embarrassed that the foreign ministers would come from other countries with huge trade delegations. But our Indian missions were always fighting shy of standing up for our businesses. That is history now. Every mission across the world, every official in the country, every representative that you have chosen is ready and willing to stand with business, stand for you, stand across the country, across the world to support you. And that is going to be the differentiating factor for Trade 4.0 going forward. We are on a mission to rewrite the script of New India that is ready, that is confident of leaving a mark on the world scene, the world trade. To all investors, I invite you to come and invest in India. To all people looking for technology, no better place than India to expand your footprint, a place where ideas are generated every single moment, a place where there's limitless potential and talent. Come to India, invest in India, earn in India, grow with India. India is the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for giving that powerful story of India so very eloquently. So, Shireen, we are just bang on time, and I hand it over to you to moderate the next 20-25 minutes with the Honorable Minister, Sanjiv and Punit.
Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much to Minister Goyal for laying out the context of what we can expect over the next few years here in India. As has been articulated by all our speakers here on the panel, India has a relative advantage at this point in time, given the global volatility, given the global uncertainty. And there are several factors for that, not just growth, but also in terms of the advantage that we enjoy, a strong forex reserves, FDI, as we've been pointing out on the panel, record high, export growth again at a record high, and as the minister has pointed out now, $1 trillion expectation and aspiration on merchandise export by 2030, and similarly, for services as well. There are several changes that have happened, several reform measures that have been undertaken. The production-linked incentive scheme across 13 sectors is one initiative of the government to attract investment across sectors, specifically the manufacturing sectors. And there are also changes on the way as far as climate security is concerned. We are now transitioning towards renewable energy. Aspirational targets have been set there as well. For green energy, we've got the first installment of a green hydrogen policy that the government has put in place as well. And as Sanjiv was talking about the tech stack in India, digital transformation is a theme that's playing out across sectors. Record digital transactions courtesy UPI that we're seeing. And of course, the government has put in place platforms like the GEMS platform, and now for e-commerce, the ONDC platform as well. So several measures being taken there and plenty to talk about. But I'm very mindful of the fact that this is Davos and everybody's got minute-by-minute engagement. So let me get straight to it. Minister Goyal, let me start by asking you, sir, you laid out the roadmap of what we should expect in terms of Trade 4.0. You also highlighted the near-term challenges that the global economy is faced with, and those impact us in India as well. You pointed out that several measures have already been taken to try and address those concerns, to try and rein in inflation. The expectation is that there will be more short-term measures there to try and bring down inflation by another 60 to 70 basis points. What can we expect, sir?
Well, you certainly know that you're not going to get any response on that. I don't know. The times are changing, they're turbulent times, and we'll have to respond. The good part is we are not dinosaurs. We are not dinosaurial in our government. We take action when it is called for. We take swift action, but we also take confidential action.
Okay. I will leave it at that, but perhaps we should expect more measures on that one. You talked about trades, and you laid out a very ambitious target of $1 trillion in merchandise export by 2030, and similarly for services. And several changes have happened along the last few years to ensure that we've got to a record number on export. What more can we expect? I highlighted some of the measures that the government has taken to try and boost export, to try and boost manufacturing. What are the next sequential steps that we can expect to try and get us to the $1 trillion aspiration that you've set out?
Before I come to that, I must say one thing. All of you in Indian industry can also support the government so that we don't need to take too many steps. So a little bit proactive approach by Indian companies, by Indian sectors on their own to ensure that we can all work in an orderly fashion, ensure prices are low, will actually save the government from taking any formal steps, but will help all of you in the long run. For example, if infrastructure projects get totally delayed or are slowed down because of very high prices for the inputs that go into infrastructure, ultimately your business will suffer in the long run if stagflation sets in, or if infrastructure spending goes down. Your projects will suffer in the long run. So we have a crisis before the world, a short-term issue to be addressed, and I would urge Indian industry also to reflect what they can do to ensure that commodity prices or our people do not suffer the consequences of high inflation. Coming to the point that you asked, madam, I think one thing I'm very clear, having looked at trade and commerce over the last 3 years, and by the way, this week we complete 3 years of our second term, so 8 years in government now, a very exciting journey, lots learned in the 8 years. I hope lots done also, but that's for you to tell us. But I think I've learned one thing, that Indian business does not want subsidies, does not want clutches. Indian business has the ability and the strength to be able to perform well, to work with the rest of the world. And as I said earlier, I do not believe you can artificially support a sector to be in the long run a relevant player in the world. Ultimately, sectors where we have strength will grow, for which the government is looking at easing your business processes, reducing your regulatory burden, making it simpler to work in India, making it easier to get land, approvals, getting rid of many of the criminal sections of the Indian laws, getting rid of compliance burden wherever it's onerous. And my own sense is businesses want handholding and support of that nature. Subsidies in the short run can support you, can give you a kickstart. But in the long run, they become very, very routine. The virtue of subsidies is only when it's swift and in the short run. Something like the production-linked incentive scheme, where we are giving a kickstart to help you invest, produce, meet your early years concerns, and then you can fly on your own. Our approach is not going to be driven by subsidies or artificial promotion of our trade. It's going to be much more focused on structural reform and ease of doing business.
So you highlighted the fact that the government doesn't intend to roll out subsidies, and you brought up the production-linked incentive scheme. As I pointed out, 13 sectors where we have seen the PLI schemes being put forward. We've also got now a comprehensive semiconductor policy that the government has very recently unveiled. So I want to understand from you, outside of what has already been done, what will be the next focus sectors? Can we expect the next round of PLI, for instance, or a semiconductor policy like a policy for other sectors?
You know, we, as I said earlier, we are responsive to the need that comes before us. By and large, we had decided these 15 sectors, APIs and medical devices was done earlier also, and mobile phones.
Yes.
So about 15 sectors. We had by and large identified them through a very transparent process in which CII, FICCI, all were very active participants. Rather, the scale committee, the steering committee for advancement of localization and employment, was totally run by the private sector. We had CII, PhD Chamber of Commerce, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, other regional bodies contributing through their time. Pawan Goenka led it. We in government were only support services. You identified the sectors. You told us where the cost discrimination is there, which we need to plug, at least for the initial period. And therefore, this has been totally an industry-led initiative and very democratic process was run. Even now, if any particular sector comes up with a demand which needs our attention, the government of India is very willing and open to look at it. And particularly where it's employment oriented, where it adds value to our ability to deliver goods and services both domestically and internationally. We have an open mind. As of now, our plans were restricted to these 15 sectors.
You talked about the aggressive move towards inking FTAs, CEPAs that have already been inked as well. So I want to understand from you, in terms of prioritization, as you said, there is limited bandwidth as well at this point in time to ensure that all of them get done. But in terms of prioritization, there are negotiations underway with the UK, with the US, with several other countries as well at this point in time. What is the roadmap as far as the FTAs are concerned, sir?
Incidentally, the US has not made up their mind whether they want to do any new FTA.
Yeah.
But there we are working through the IPEF, the new initiative launched yesterday, to look at what other processes we can do to support the value chains amongst trusted partners. But our approach to FTAs have been that national interest comes first. We are ensuring that domestic businesses, domestic sensitive sectors are given the necessary protection. Yet at the same time, we want to engage with the world from a position of strength. We don't want to be a country which is closing its doors to international engagement. And if you see the agreements done with UAE and Australia, I'm happy to share with all of you. I've yet to see one adverse report, either from media, either from business, either from any sector, be it agriculture, be it dairy. Not a single, I hope this doesn't mean that somebody now starts writing negative news articles. But actually, in both of them, I've yet to read one article, and my counterparts in Australia and UAE give me the same feedback. Not one negative article Not one complaint from any sectors in both those countries. That's the win-win approach that will help us really succeed. And we are looking at FTAs with developed countries. We are looking at FTAs where we get big markets, where we can also get high technology products or good inputs, which will help us create more jobs in the country, from where we can get large investments. The UAE has committed over $100 billion. And every meeting yesterday, I met the Mubadala chief. They're looking for more opportunities. They're looking for good partners. In fact, I would invite businesses in India to look at coming up with large projects. They're not looking at very, very small projects, difficult for them to handle. That will obviously come through their indirect investments. So they invest in AIF and our National Infrastructure Investment Fund can become the vehicle for the smaller investments. But they're really looking at big ticket investments into the country. And I hope our Indian businesses will provide them that opportunity. Canada is looking for large investments. UK, EU, all of the Nordic countries, they're really keen to invest big bucks into the country. And I do believe it's for us to grab that opportunity. And we are ready and willing to play the role of the bridge between the investors and Indian corporates. Invest India is happy to handle. Our ministry is happy to support any such efforts.
Before I get the other panelists in, Mr. Goyal, I want to connect the bridge between FTAs and FDI that we just spoke of as well. And in the context of the discussions here in Davos, climate security, food security, these are issues that policymakers, government leaders like yourself, and of course, businesses are going to have to focus on. From an FDI perspective, how important will it be to draw in investments into renewable energy, clean energy? I ask you this also in the context of your experience as the former power minister, food security. What is the vision there to draw in FDI into these areas and these sectors?
Well, I think the excitement across the world about India's renewable energy program is remarkable. Yesterday, I was chatting with the presidential envoy of President Joe Biden, former Secretary of State John Kerry, with whom we've worked right since 2014. You know, Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Obama had hit off a very good friendship, and which has continued over the years with America. And the Paris Agreement, to date, is really an outcome of the deep partnership that we had between the US and India, with India playing a catalyst role, bringing the developing world together. That's what I think John mentioned even yesterday at the Coalition of First Movers. India is being looked upon as the future renewable energy capital of the world. They're excited about the large investments committed by almost every big corporate. So we have Tata's here who's looking at green hydrogen, powering their steel making. Green steel is now getting to become a premium product. We have mobile companies who are looking to convert their towers into clean energy fuel towers. Almost every sector. We have cement here. Dalmia, Bharat Dalmia, who's a part of the First Movers initiative and was amongst the first companies, along with Mahindra's, to join that. And yesterday, by the way, on behalf of all of you, I have committed that when we come to Davos next year, that's 7 months away, and I think CII will have to play the lead role in that, FICCI will have to play a role. I hope we'll have 50 of our top companies, including State Bank of India, Mr. Khara, who will be a part of the First Movers Coalition, who will commit themselves to serious investments and effort on turning more sustainable on their ESG projects. And I can tell you, Secretary Kerry yesterday has in fact countered my comments by saying, look, we can't talk in the air about investments. You show us the project, I promise you the money. That was the extent of commitment that he was ready to give. And we see that across. When we talk to Germany, the IGCC consultations, when we talk to Japan, JETRO and all their different bodies are actually literally camping in India for JICA and all of them to be able to invest in clean energy in India. The Scandinavian, the Nordic countries are all looking for large investments. So let's, all of us, come up with very tangible plans. Let's look at large projects, large and small both, of course, but large projects is where we can get the big FDI ticket to come in. That will bring scale into India, help us meet our 500 gigawatt clean energy target ahead of schedule. It's 2030 now, but we've done that in the past. We can do it again. Let's meet it ahead of schedule. New technologies are coming to the fore. Pump storage is being looked at as a serious leveler or as the base load to provide peak hour power. So we have all the enablers in India. And I would urge all of you to seriously look at within your organizations. And once we all pool in, I think the whole nation will obviously benefit from the business-led initiatives.
Well,
so FDI is a natural outcome of the effort that all of us will do.
Yes, please.
You know, I think the passion is amazing and the confidence is amazing. But the one thing that India, that we're not talking about enough, even in the First Movers Coalition, is nature-based solutions. The technological items, renewable energy, the big investments in green hydrogen, get all the big-ticket items. Nature-based solutions are what will get us from where we are today to where we need to get to. And they are the low-hanging fruit that we need to go after now. India is uniquely positioned to leverage nature-based solutions. I mean, we're working at Deloitte with the state of Haryana around stubble burning, as a for instance. We're doing work with them around afforestation using rural women. And it's a twofer because you build the forest canopy in the state and you employ local women. Now, this doesn't sound very sexy. It isn't the big ticket item investment, but it is the answer, I believe, that we need to talk more about. So I just wanted to add to what you just said.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Punit, for making that intervention. And you're absolutely right. We do need to look at grassroots solutions as well, along with the big ticket projects. I know everyone's looking at their watches because I'm sure everyone's got their next appointment ready. Mr. Venkatram, let me ask you, we heard from the Minister in terms of the roadmap that's being laid out. Add to that in terms of what the specific imperatives will be, what would you prioritize?
Well, I thank you. I just made a few points here, and which I would like to bring out. One is, a lot that we've heard about also flows into the need to democratize, right? I mean, we've used technology to democratize India. Look at the way in which, for example, mobility has the financial inclusion that came out of it. I think when we talk from technology to trade 4.0, we should also be looking.
Actually, you should learn from the politicians how to hold a mic. This is the best way, then it goes beautifully.
But I'd have to be a good singer, sir. Yes. So when we look in terms of the democratization of international trade, or say trade itself, inclusive trade, I think we should also see how all that we're talking about touches entrepreneurs, the MSMEs, and I do believe that that again is a huge opportunity we have. The second point I would like to make is the leverage of technology to our advantage, work to our comparative advantages. We mentioned areas like healthcare, fintech, education, tourism. These are all areas of great strength for us, also because of the fact that we have enabling technologies and the reach. The third is around making the step change. I think the Honorable Minister has given us a rallying cry. I think we as industry need to make the step change as well. And there was also the point raised in terms of capital. I would like to emphasize the issue is not just capital, but long-term capital. Because a lot of what we're describing requires long-term capital. And I think that is where we really need a solution, whether it's for infrastructure, digital infrastructure, climate change, for everything. We need capital that works for us in the long term. And finally, I would like to acknowledge here the role of the government as a facilitator, an enforcer, and a negotiator for us. I think all that we're hearing around free trade, we sometimes, look at it and get dollar signs in our eyes, because truly opening up trade for India is really about what we talked about, of going beyond borders, of becoming more borderless in a world where borders are being built again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Venkatram. Sure. I'll get Mr. Khara. Sir, I don't know if you have a microphone there, but we'll try and get a microphone across to you as well. to the point that was being made here by Mr. Venkatram, in the need for capital and long-term capital. As India's largest bank, sir, what do you have to say in terms of being able to finance and fund some of these large projects and aspirations?
I think we are well poised to support any such activity, and we are actually very keen to look forward for the investment flowing into the country. And I think as far as large projects are concerned, there is no constraint as far as funding is concerned.
No constraints. Yeah.
I'd just like to add, banking has been one sector that this government has focused very seriously over the last 8 years to strengthen. I think they're going to see record profits this year at the lowest interest rates.
Absolutely.
And that's the strength of Indian banking. Actually, low interest rates will always be good for the country and the economy. And I think what Mr. Khara can also do, and I've seen State Bank do that, is catalyze debt and capital. So once the State Bank DPR is made or the report is ready, it catalyzes capital both for equity and debt from across the world, because that's the strength of Indian banking today and their reporting. So I think money should not be a problem to my mind.
Money is not a constraint at all. And we can offer solutions.
But let me add to this. I think in addition to banking, we are now seeing in India 20 years of private sector insurance. And
yes.
Insurance is one of the biggest sources of long-term capital.
Absolutely.
And that's something that as an industry, the insurance industry is representing to the regulator as well. We should start pushing the industry to utilizing that capital more and more for long-term infrastructure projects, to fund startups. Because this is another new source that didn't exist 2 decades ago.
Absolutely. And Sanjiv, you want to add to the imperatives? The minister said that the government is doing its part, industry needs to do its part as well. What would be the priorities as far as industry is concerned in the new era of Trade 4.0?
From what we've just discussed in the last half an hour, what we are seeing is almost every duck falling in place. You don't need to go to industry to go and do its business. If the opportunity is there, industry is going to go and do it. Industry just needs to ensure that we get an adequate risk-adjusted return on our capital. I think the government has provided the tailwinds through the last so many years where we've not seen the private capex cycle. That capex cycle actually started 2 quarters ago, not just with commodities, not just with chemicals, but we saw that in construction, real estate, we've seen that in logistics, and let's hope that that continues as well. Another important area is that actually a lot of the hard work is what we are seeing the central government play a significant role. We have to see central and state governments working together. If a new investment is going to come in, you need land, you need energy, you need labor. These are the next set of laws. We know there have been some setbacks in the past, but I think we have to all come together, and at times Piyush says that we need a common narrative that has to go out in the media as well. This is not just the central government or a particular state government or a particular industry asking. This is about laying the foundation to make India more competitive and to leverage then that opportunity for the next 3 decades.
Absolutely. Yes, Punit.
On the narrative point that Sanjiv made, that is exactly right. Just a common song sheet that everybody can sing from. China did an excellent job, and I'm trying to suggest this from a standpoint of looking at a competitor. But the narrative is very important. In the FDI study that Deloitte did, there's 75% of the 2,000 CXOs that we surveyed want to invest in India, but there's a disconnect between their perception, particularly Japanese and Asian investors and leaders, as to what has happened in India and what reality is. I mean, what they believe the reality is. So that perception gap, your narrative point is exactly right. Minister, one other point for you. I think the passion is excellent, the roadmap is excellent, but what China does is they operate much like a CEO, like I would, running Deloitte. They have an implementation plan and they follow through on it. And I think that sort of a consensus view is important as well.
No, incidentally, I do believe that the exports this year did not see that quantum jump only by chance. Just to let you know, we actually went through a bottom-up approach rather than just a figure out of the top of our hat and say, okay, 400 billion will be the target. So first the officials engaged with all the export promotion councils and sectoral businesses. Then the secretary level meetings were held. Then meetings were held at my level. Simultaneously, we talked to all the missions, and 200 missions gave their own inputs of what they could do in terms of growth. By the way, right now that process is being repeated for the current year based on the current situation also. And then every week we were monitoring what's happening in terms of achievement. Then we were monitoring the value component and the volume component. And just giving you a flavor of what we did with exports. Similarly, there was another track working on services exports. So our original target was 225 billion, up to 240. And then we did 254. So I think it's been a joint effort, very much to a plan. Similarly, PLI came out of an effort, very much to a plan. And there also we have a whole team under Mr. Anurag Jain, regularly monitoring. The 540 odd companies under PLI are all brought under the project monitoring group, where every single problem, even if they have a problem in getting a change of land user approval, all they have to do is tell the project monitoring group, and it becomes our responsibility to sort it out. So I assure you, it's not business as usual for the government. It's government as business that we are trying to bring in that professionalism.
Well, I think that is the perfect opportunity to call a close on this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard, we hope that there is a symphony, a confluence of action that takes India to what Punit Renjen mentioned at the start of the program, that this will be India's century, and the hope and the aspiration is that if there is this confluence and there is a symphony and there is a conductor that moves pieces together, we will be able to get there. Minister Goyal, Sanjiv Bajaj, Mr. Venkatram, Chandrajit Banerjee, Punit Renjen, many, many thanks for joining us here at Davos 2022 to take us through India's strategy for the future, for a borderless world and Industry 4.0 and Trade 4.0. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.